All right, today we're going to be doing a rear wheel bearing that has the speed sensor for the ABS on a 2015 Kia Sedona minivan. Been throwing up codes for ABS sensor to the right rear wheel. So we're just going to start by taking the rear tire off. It's going to be a 3/4 inch. Next step, maybe a little bit hard to see with the lighting. Next thing we got to do is remove the brake caliper, the rotor off, so that we can get in there, get to where the actual hub is. So on this, looks like maybe a 14, let's see. 14 on that. Going to be the 2 bolts, one on each end of the caliper. First bolt. Second bolt. Take the caliper. Sometimes they're a little bit tight. If they are, just grab your little flathead screwdriver. You can kind of reach in from the top, catch it, put just a little bit of pressure on, press that cylinder back in. Once that cylinder is pushed back in, it lifts off pretty easy. You want to set this around. I'm just going to set it on top of the control arm right there. That way it doesn't want to fall. Just find a place to where you're not pulling down on that hose. You don't want to do any damage on that hose. Next thing we've got to do, we'll go ahead and pull the brake pads off just to get them out of the way for now. Take them, set them over to the side. We're going to be reusing them since they were in good shape. Then we got to pull this bracket off that actually holds the caliper. You're going to have 2 screws on the back. However, the bottom screw that you've got to get to is guarded by this control arm right here. So we've got to drop this off as well in order to get in there to it. Alright, so it is a 19. We're going to go ahead and take it off with the impact. Just make sure you keep it on a little bit of a low setting. Don't try to go too fast with it. Catch the back side of the nut. Go ahead and drop that off. Set the nut to the side. Alright, now once you get to that point, you've got to get this bolt to come out. Slide through the control arm. And the bolt's out. Got that out. Should be able to knock that down. Grab the dead blow. A few gentle taps. Now we've got it clear. Now we can get into the other bolt that holds that bracket in. These are going to tend to be a little bit tighter, so you may have to give it a couple of good little bumps, get it going. that bolt out. Then you will need a short extension for the other one because you got to kind of slide through that bracket in the back. Get to the bolt. And you got your caliper bracket. And we just lost the washer. There we go. Make sure you keep your washers on there. They use lock nuts on them. Alright, now we got that. Now the next thing we can do, these couple of Phillips heads right here. Alright, I do not have an impact driver, but what we've got to do, we've got to get these Phillips heads to break loose. I just got a number 3 Phillips bit, put it on my impact, just put it on the lowest setting I've got, which is a 1, just to give it a little bit of that hammer action, just to see. These usually have a little bit of rust on them, so that's what makes them a little bit tight, and they're kind of hard to get off with just a straight screwdriver. Out of the way. Now that's going to be froze up just a little bit. You can see that little rim right there. It tends to want to freeze up. What I do, go. You just rotate it while you tap it here. That'll get it to pop loose, break the freeze up, then you can pull it out. Go ahead and set that to the side. Alright, now you can get in here. It's kind of hard to see on the back side, but there are 4 bolts, and I'll show you what where their position is going to be on the hub. So the new hub, this is where your ABS sensor sets up. It's got your pickup inside there. This new hub is going to sit in here like so. So you're going to have 4 bolts that run through the back bracket into the hub. And for the most part, you should be able to get good clearance to them. Yep, should be good to go. So we should be able to finish getting it out from here. Now those are probably 17. Yep, 17. Back in there. Once again, get a good grip on it somewhere. Usually kind of snug, so a few good bumps get them to pop loose. Go get a deep well 17 to get that last one right in the bracket. So had to go get the deep well for this, get back in there onto it. only problem with using a deep well there, you can only break it loose because it'll bind up against the shock, and we don't want to try to have to take the shock out as well. Tried to do that with just the shorty, it won't work, so we're just going to put the little swivel onto it. Let us get back in there to where we need to be able to grab hold of it. There's the first bolt out. That's the pain to get to. The rest of them are not bad. Second bolt out. Third bolt. Now the last one, you're going to notice this thing isn't really pinned in or anything, so once you get to that last bolt, you kind of have to make sure you hold it up here, else it will fall on you. Last bolt out. Now we need to go ahead and unplug the little sensor that sits on the back here. Move the little retainer clip on it, and then you can just unplug the sensor. Just leave it up here out of the way. Then you can rotate that around. Now you can see the back of that housing where you've got your emergency cable stop coming in. The emergency cable, the way it works, got a little slide retainer right here. All right, so we're going to go ahead and remove this brake retainer. Just get your flathead screwdriver in there, rotate it around, get it to lift up. Just be careful once you start to get it up high. That retainer loves to go flying, so just kind of go slow and easy with it. There we go. Just let it fall down nice and easy so we don't lose it. Then you can take the brake retainer, pull it up, rotate it around. Now we can take that part in, put it on the bench, and get it loose. All right, now we got it in here on the bench. We're going to go ahead and remove these two bolts. They hold the retainer on the bracket for the e-brake. So we'll go ahead and pop those. This is a 13 millimeter. Get those two out. Then we can lift that bracket off. Now we're sitting here, we've got the main bracket that this holds into, and we've got the brake assembly. What we want to try to do, take the brake assembly off. Come on. Nope. Go back down. Just got to slide it up until it comes off of the piston. And you'll notice the piston pushed itself out right there. Not a big deal. It'll push right back in. It's based on that bracket pushing on it. Mechanical fix. Okay. All right, so there's not a real good way to get this into the press and get a good straight angle on it. So we're just going to try to see if we can tap it and get it to come loose. And it looks like it's trying to. It's just some light taps on those flat tabs there. As you can see, it's starting to separate. Once it gets started, we might be able to reach up in there, get a little bit of persuasion onto it. See if we can keep it moving. And there's the old hub. As you can see, just had a bunch of rust that accumulated right there and just kind of froze it inside the bracket. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a few minutes, get a wire brush, clean out some of that. I'll put a little bit of Never Seez on that surface to keep the new one from getting frozen in there once we get it ready to go back together. Now we're going to start putting everything back together. Got the new one here. You can see no corrosion anywhere on that surface. So we'll just grab a quick towel, give it a good wipe real fast, make sure there's nothing on there. And then we'll just give it a real quick test fit just to make sure. And she slides down on nice and easy. So what we'll do, add just a little bit of Never Seez on that surface to help keep that rust away in the future. Don't need a lot here because you're not really trying to do anything except inhibit the rust on that surface. So just put a real light little bit coming around there. Just like that. All right, back to putting this together. Just remember, plug right here sits down at the bottom. The part with the e-brake cylinder goes up at the top. So what we're gonna do, slide this together just like so. Let it sit there. Go ahead and get our pad out here. We're going to take our brake, go ahead and slide it over the top. All the way up. That part to hook in. Now we've got that setting together. Now we need to go ahead, slide that brake out of the way. What I want to do is I want to brace this up to where this is up in the air a little bit and set it up on top of something real quick. Just like that, let that sit together. And then we'll take this part, go ahead and slide that down, get it out of the way so that we can start the assembly of the top. Okay. Brake lever slides through from the outside, goes in this way so that when the e-brake comes around it hooks it. So we'll just slide that through. And get the rubber to come through. Just like so. Then we can set it back down, get that to go up inside, get it lined back up with the holes, just like that. Alright. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and put this brake assembly back together for the e-brake. So I'm just going to take that bracket, sits down, and you'll see it kind of sits down, locks down in that bottom right there. And the other adjuster just slides in on top of it. But what you'll notice is that adjuster kind of dry. So what we're going to do, get a little bit of extra grease onto it just to make sure it moves freely in there before we put it back together. And then we're just going to slide it down in there. Just like so. Wipe off that excess a little bit. Now we've got that adjuster sitting in there. Alright, next thing we're going to do, we're going to drop the pin in, but we're going to clean it off real quick. It's gotten a little bit of dust and stuff on it. So we'll clean it off, put a little bit of fresh grease in it. So same thing with the pin. Just get a little bit of good fresh grease. One thing I like to do, you'll notice, marine boat trailer stuff. Try to use that as often as I can. It's got real good resistant properties against water and moisture that can get inside there. Now the pin, it just sits inside here. You can look down inside. You can see it's got kind of a little cradle that it sets into. So you'll just set that pin in there. just like so, to where it's in the middle. And then you can grab that lever, make sure that it pulls and sits down in, just like that. All right. Then we take the other end. We're gonna wipe it off again real quick. Get all the dirt off of it. Then we're just gonna throw a little bit of grease back onto it. Same as what we just did with those. Again, you don't need a whole lot, you just need a little bit on the surface of it to help it. You can see this one, when we took it apart, has a paint mark. That paint mark is really just to kind of give you an idea of the alignment. But what you need to know with these, they need to sit to where that flat spot is straight up and down. So cradle that, put it back together just like so, and then you'll notice, activate that lever, should push that out. As long as that's pushing out, then we know we're engaging and going to be pressing out. So now we catch this part. We want to take it back here in the back. We didn't want to unbolt it, so what we did is, you can see that little bracket right there, we just didn't take the bolt out. It's just this little spring clip, and that spring clip is going to engage onto the brake and hold the bottom of it. So we slide it on, tuck it underneath that spring clip, and we'll pull it up into place just like so. Now that we've got that on there, now we've got to get this spread apart and drop down. I find it easiest just to kind of press down one side, rotate that until we know we can get an engagement flat. Then we can pull it over, get the other side. Once you get the other side, pull it down till you can get your engagement. And again, once we know it's flat, just push it back into place to where it centers up. So it should be sitting down into the groove on both sides. And again, the ability to pull that lever on the back side for the e-brake, as you can see, squeezes that out to be able to engage the emergency brake system. That way you know you've got that back together correctly. All right, once we've got that part finished up, got those seated in correctly, we're going to want to flip this assembly over, put our bracket back on that holds the e-brake. So we'll just lift it, make sure that we hold the hub and everything together, flip it over. We don't need these boxes anymore. Then we can just set it down on the studs. Just make sure that when you sit it on top of the studs that you're on a wood surface, something that's not going to damage your threads at all. Bracket just sits back on like so. Go ahead and get these started by hand. And we're going to run them down to where they're snug for now. And then we'll get the torque wrench out, make sure they're tightened up to where they need to be. Alright, so these, what we're going to do, run them down to 15 foot-pounds. They're not real heavy bolts. They don't hold a lot of pressure. So we're just going to set them up, get the torque wrench on. There we go. Wait till we get that good beep for the torque. There we go. Those are nice and tight. Shouldn't have to do anything with them except put them back together onto the vehicle now. Alright, now we're ready to start putting it back together. First thing we want to do, kind of hold this whole assembly together is one thing. We want to go ahead and start putting that brake assembly back together. So we just hook it on to the tab. Once we get it hooked on, then it's just a matter of pulling it back. Till we get it to drop back down into place. Once that's back down into place, you'll hand me that other slip keeper pin. Thanks to our camera guy helping us out a little bit, getting a little yucky today, but that's all right. So that, we'll just push it back on, get it back into place. All right, you'll hand me a big ratchet right there, something I can tap with. Close enough. Wrench, ratchet, same difference. Just a little something to tap it back down. Get it secured into place.
That's why I'm the cameraman.
Once that's in place, we're good to go. Now we can slide this assembly back around, back into its cradle where it belongs. And the real trick is getting these bolt holes to line up. Sometimes it's interesting, sometimes it's easy. You can look through. And the first one started enough now that it'll hold itself in place. You can see right there where it started coming through. Now that we got all 4 of those bolts started back in, the one thing I forgot to tell you, I did take my bolts, had a little bit of corrosion on them, take them over, clean them up on a wire wheel, make sure that when you put it back together, you're not going to get anything binding up into threads. I'm all just snug down with the wrench. Now we can go ahead and get the torque wrench out, get that set up, get them torqued. We're going to run these down 2 different times on pressure. First one we're going to run them to will be 30 pounds. So just get your torque wrench. If you got a clicker wrench, same difference. I'm using a digital, so this makes it a little bit easier for me. Always remember when you're trying to do the one that you got to have a swivel on, just make sure you're holding your angles really good, because when you got a swivel and you're trying to do a torque wrench, not always the easiest thing, and you do lose a little bit on your torque. So if you go over just a hair on your beat, it's not too bad, but don't try to go crazy with it. Alright, so that's our first pass. Next pass, we're going to run them at 45, which is the final spec on them. It says 42 to 50, so we're just going to stick it at 45 and call it good enough, since all they're giving us is a range. We just want to be somewhere in the middle of that range. 45. So I've already got the swivel on, so I'm going to go ahead and do that one that was difficult to get to first. The other thing with a torque wrench, always nice, smooth, no jerky motions when you're running a torque wrench. Last thing you want to do is just over snatch it and put too much pressure on it. Alright, and yes, I am using the Harbor Freight Quinn digital torque wrench. Had really good luck with it, no complaints so far. Seems to work really good for everything I've needed it for. Alright, now we've got that put together. She's bolted, just give it a little freeze, make sure she's got good spin. Make sure you don't feel anything binding up with it. We should be good to go at that point. Now we can go ahead, take that plug, go ahead and slide that plug back in, so if our camera guy can get a good view in the back side here. Alright, so right down here you can see we got the plug. We just got to get those two slid back together. Slide them back on, then we've got to get our little metal clip. And this is always a little bit of an adventure, trying to get this to slide back in. But I find it easy if you start one side first. Nope. Get it started. Stay on. There we go. And then just double check it, make sure it doesn't pull off, and then you're good to go. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and put the rotor back on. Remember, you've got these two screws that hold the rotor in place. Two screws here, so what I do, just turn them around, get them pointed the same direction. Makes it easy for the alignment. Slide it right up into place. Once you get that into place, get your two small screws and your Phillips head screwdriver. Alright, once you get those on there, these you don't need to really torque them down hard. It only takes about 14-15 pounds of pressure. So just a real good turn with your screwdriver. Rotor's in place. Now we get ready to put the bracket back on for the caliper. Slide it back around. Start the first bolt. And that should line up the second one pretty good for you. Get it started and going. All right, now we got those in place. We'll get our torque wrench back out. These take 37 to 42. So we're going to go ahead and run these up to 40. Just like that. And again, these are 14 millimeter. Double check them, make sure. There we go. Good and tight. All right, next thing we want to do, you can see, because we're reusing these pads that were on here, because the pads were in good shape, we just had to replace the hub. I want to get a little bit of brake cleaner, clean that off real quick. Anytime I'm trying to clean something that close of an area, I try to use a little bit of a spray nozzle, clean them off. Biggest thing we're trying to do, get rid of any of that dirt that's there, let that dry out, help get rid of that squeaking sound, and then we'll put a little bit of brake quiet back on in place. All right, when it comes to using brake quiet, I am old school. I know a lot of these new pads have these pieces on the back that help make the not squeak. I'm old school. I still put a little bit on every single time just to make sure I don't have to worry about it, because I don't want to hear squeaking brakes on a vehicle. I always put just a little bit on those tabs too. That way I'm not having to listen to it squeak at all. Okay? Get that one bottomed out in there. the other one. As you can see, that side, that's where the caliper was. Also on this set of pads, on the insides where your wear indicator is, once you start hearing a constant little screech, that's your wear indicator letting you know that you're pretty much out of pad and it's time to replace your pads. Go, cradle down in there. All right, now that we've got those setting in place, now we can go ahead, put that sway bar back in, take our little hammer, tap it back up into place. And because there is a little bit of pressure, it's going to be misaligned just a little bit. So as you're trying to start your bolt into it, take a screwdriver from the other side. You can gently pry back onto it, get it to line up, and get that bolt to start. That bolt should go most of the way through, just like that. And then we'll get our wrench back. Again, 19mm. Put our wrench on there. Go ahead and finish running that screw the rest of the way back in like we did. All right, now we're ready to go ahead and just get the nut started. Alright, now we got her bottomed out. We'll switch out, get the torque wrench and the wrench so that we can go ahead and finish tightening this down. Torque on these, 70 foot-pounds. And the size of the bolt, we're just going to go ahead and hit it at 70 right off the bat. We're not going to work our way up on it. $70 foot-pounds. Get that constant tone, you're there. All right, now we're ready to go ahead and put the caliper back in place. Just swing the caliper back around, make sure we don't have any twist in the line. Slide it back down on here, just like so. Get our 2 screws for it. Just get the first one started. Once you get that top first one started, then it's really easy to get to the next one. All right, get that down as far as we can. And then we'll grab out our torque wrench. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and get these torqued up. We're going to set our wrench on 27. Make sure I didn't hit a button I wasn't supposed to yet. We're good. All right, then our next stop, 34. Nice constant tone, and we're secured. Now at this point, we've gotten pretty much everything back together. Got our control bar length back in, got our switch plug back up, got our e-brake hook back up, everything's back on, we're ready to put the tire back on. Alright, I've had several people tell me tires are too heavy to lift. They're always a hard pain to get up in place. What I like to do before I even go to pick the tire up is I'll try to turn my hub one way or the other. If I go where the center bolt's just up, or I can go flat, either way. But my whole goal before I ever pick the tire up, I want to get the tire up underneath where I'm at and get my bolts. So these top two are pretty much flat. So I want to go ahead and get those top two pretty much flat before I even try to pick it up. Makes it a little easier for me to pick it up at that point. And then I usually grab it by the rim, lift it up, kind of catch it with a little bit of my leg. And that allows me to slide it up into place. Make sure you keep a hand on there because sometimes they want to pop off until you get a couple of the nuts started. I always try to start the very top one first because it's easy to get to. Should have a little bit of thread showing. Once you get that one started, then you can push on the bottom, get it to slide all the way up in there, get the rest of them started. Alright, got that back on. Now we're pretty much done. Just going to finish tightening this up, getting it down off the lift. If you got any questions about what's going on here, leave comments in the message for me. If it was informative, helps you out, go ahead and give me a subscribe. Hit that like button, helps me out in the algorithms, helps get my message out to other people. If you got questions about the tools or any method I use, hit me up in the comments. I'll try to answer you back as soon as I can. Until then, this is Everyday Mechanic and Fabrication saying thanks for watching.